about how to build a relational culture at St. Andrew. And I know a lot of you are thinking, we already have a relational culture. Look at all these people talking to each other. And that's part of the story. But I'm really glad that you're here. Whoops. Oops. I forget this is... Okay, so our goals of this class, it's a 5-session class. Our goals are to help St. Andrew move toward a relational culture, and we'll talk a lot about that today. Introduce practices that assist in that process, and to deepen relationships between members of our community. Those are the goals. So what to expect each week? Here's a broad class outline. Today we're going to introduce relational culture. What is it? Why is it important? Why might we want to move toward it? Next week, we're going to use one-to-one meetings to build a relational culture. On March 23rd, we'll be refining our skills and learning a little bit more, putting a little bit more depth to it. March 30th, we're going to be building power to work for good. And don't freak out about the word power. It has a positive connotation as well as a negative connotation, but we'll talk about that. And then on April 6th, specifically, what does this mean for St. Andrew? So, I'm Pat Christiansen. You all know Pastor Allison, and I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Allison for the first question.
Okay, great. So we're going to start with some conversation. We're going to be having a lot of conversations in pairs and in small table groups in this class because we're building a relational culture starting right now. And we've been doing it, of course, as well. So the first thing that we are just going to kickstart with is this question of, why does St. Andrew matter? Why is this institution, which is one formal way of talking about a church as an institution, or it's a community. Why does this community matter? Is there something that makes what we do here different than what you do at another community or another institution? Is there something about our mission that's particularly needed in the world that isn't already covered somewhere else? So please think for a moment about that and then talk at your table about what St. Andrew is about. Why does it matter? Why is it needed, especially at this time in history? Go ahead and share with your table. To the big group, thank you. Okay, first, so I'm going to just call on tables, all right? And see if you have anything to share, okay? I'll start over here. What did you all talk about? You just say it and then I'll repeat it.
Oh, okay. I said, well, for me, okay. For me, St. Andrew's ministry helps me live out my values in a way that's meaningful. Like RIC and okay.
Okay, how about somebody from this team? Well, you want to be first?
I guess I can go. I just was saying at our table, and we didn't have much time to talk, which we don't, but that's all right. This is one of my 4 families, and I come here when I can to meet my family and to be inspired and all of
This table?
Apparently, I'm the one that talks a lot. We decided that we are a pillar of the community. Well, we're part of the community, the larger community, and so
we're always there, and we can be counted on. That's why we're a pillar of the community, not because we're exceptional in any manner, but just we're always here, and we will be always here.
So we offer something. What is it that we offer? It sounds like we're offering something to the community by existing. What is it that we're offering?
I don't know, someone to point at and laugh?
I would
say, in my interpretation anyway, that we are a place where we are trying to live out God's love in our community, and we can be seen as that to some, especially in an era when churches maybe are not seen that way.
What matters to us is the core values of this place, which dictate our lives, that we show to the community. That St. Andrew provides a sanctuary for many.
I'm going to repeat sort of. I didn't get a chance to talk when we were doing the exercise, so I'm going to talk now. For me, it's a sense of community, which is a little bit different than a sense of family. It's sort of like living in a small town where, you know, people leave their porch light on, and you know, you can count on people to be there for you. Yeah, because, you know, living in such a sprawling metropolitan area, it's often hard to, I mean, for those of us that grew up in small communities, it's hard to feel that. So that's what I feel here.
And we gossip really well, just like small towns, right? We all know each other's business.
I have not found this to be a gossipy church. I have seen gossipy churches, and I'm really glad that this is not one of them. So thank you for being good neighbors in that way. Yes, okay, what else? We probably each table only shared one thing so far. So were there other things that haven't been hit on about why St. Andrew matters, or how it's different than other institutions or pillars of the community, or what it means for it to be a pillar of the community? Yeah.
We've been members for a long time, and one of the things that I think is a characteristic of the congregation is we're receptive to people that I think sometimes probably feel awkward going somewhere else to church. There's always somebody here that walks up to the new person and says, "Hi, are you new here?" Talks to them, and it warms things up for people and makes it easier to be. And then as they get involved, you know, there's a certain amount of the community love that comes into play.
I don't run very well.
I've not been here a long time, but the time I have been here, I've found that it's an unconditional welcome.
So over here I gave a rather selfish answer, but I'm going to say it anyway. I retired a little over 10 years ago, and rather than sitting at home and watching TV all the time, St. Andrew gives me an outlet. You know, I'm involved in adult education and worship planning and communications and working on the website, and it keeps me involved in things in my retirement, and I'm guessing that that's true for a lot of retired people around here, and that's a good thing. That's a good service.
It's not just involved, it's purpose. It gives us purpose.
It gives us purpose for us retired folks, and that's a very good thing.
Also non-retired folks too.
Also what?
Non-retired folks.
Non-retired.
Yeah.
Non-retired folks, okay. Okay, yeah, it's worth pointing out that our sorry. Our children have pointed out from time to time that if I die first, they're worried about their dad because he's kind of quiet. And as long as he stays involved in church, they say he'll be fine.
Not many churches have the sanctuary of the firs, and the care for the environment for this church is very strong.
Sorry.
Okay, as Sandy and I, as somebody newer, all our welcome was very obvious to us, but as I get involved in other activities here, the welcome to the community, you know, Tai Chi class, whatever, just as one example of everything else, the community feels welcome here. And I mean, that's a place you got to start. If I don't feel welcome, I don't care what you have to say. We have to have that initial welcome, so.
And let's not forget about the community garden. Our yard is too shady to be able to grow food, and we really appreciate having a place to grow food here.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that there are more things that we might add to the list. But I know you probably can't read it from where you are unless you're really close here. But some of the themes I'm seeing involve living out our values. So it gives us an outlet for living out of our values and living out our values, finding purpose in life. And then it also is a witness to the wider community of living out those values. So it's like a beacon of hope in that way. And then I also see a theme of sense of community, whether it's a sense of family or community, like a small town community, and the way that that community is uniquely open to people who maybe don't get accepted in other communities or have trouble breaking into other communities. And I think those are the two big themes that I see. And then there are, other like details and other things that could also be pulled out, a place of inspiration, and some of the particularities about our particular values and living them out. But thank you. That's really helpful. And I think helps show, we're hoping that this can kind of connect with what we're trying to do through a relational community. And we think that the relationality that already exists is also part of what makes these things true already. It's not that we're not already living a relational culture, it's how do we live into that relational culture even more fully, to live into these things even more fully. So Pat, why don't you continue on?
Okay. One of the reasons that we matter is because this world, as was described in Genesis as the Garden of Eden, a perfect place, and as is described in the end of Revelation, a new heaven, a new earth where everything is just in wonderful peace. We have those bookends in our scripture that give us a blueprint for what the world is supposed to be like. It isn't, right? I mean, in a perfect world, donuts would be part of a healthy diet, especially the cream-filled ones, right? In a really perfect world, everybody would get along with everybody else. So we talk about the world as it is and the world as it could be. There's a tension in between the world as it is and the world as it could be. So what are some examples of the world as it is but maybe shouldn't be, or we wish it weren't? So, for example, access to health care is not, everybody doesn't have access to health care. I'll say that. Everybody can't find an affordable place to live.
Don't take them all.
I don't.
What do you guys think?
Where's the mic? Okay. So just raise your hand. We won't do another table talk, but just raise your hand if you have another idea of the world as it is, but you wish it were different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not enough food, especially for the little ones and the older ones.
Immigration.
Violence in our community. We're a very violent culture.
People being disappeared, especially in the southern parts of the Americas, as well as in Native American reservations.
Our value as humans being tied to our ability to produce things of capitalist value.
One more back there.
Failure to care for the earth in a way that is sustainable.
Intergenerational traumas that affect the generations to come.
So we can all see the problems, right? And as people of faith, we have a unique ability and a unique mandate to work toward bringing the world around as it should be. However, what that does is there's a tension between as it is and as it should be. I think everybody should have a wonderful, affordable place to live. That takes money away from something else, right? So there's this tension in between. So part of a relational culture is to learn how to use power, and we'll talk more about power in a couple of weeks, but collectively we have a power. And the power can be either used without love, as it is now. So power is used to reward the upper 1% of people. Power is used now to divide people, to make it difficult to have an easy life. But what if we could use power with love instead to help people attain those things that would make life just a little better, just a little better. So world as it is, world as it could be. Okay. So we talk about relational culture. Pastor Allison is going to talk to you about what is culture.
How would you define culture?
This is how I define it.
Anybody have any ideas? The way we do things. What's another idea? How would you define culture? Tradition. Yes, exactly. So I liked you said the way we do things. Sometimes it's sort of like the character or something of the way we do things, you know? So what we define in community organizing as culture is what we do over and over again. So the things that are practiced again and again over time. And it says values, but we don't mean the values that we write on the door. Those are our aspirational values that we're trying to live out. The culture is which values actually in practice get lived out. And there's always a gap. There's always a gap between the world as it is and the world as it could be. Our aspirational values are the world as it could be, what we want our values to be. But culture is what ends up actually over and over again getting prioritized. And often it's wonderful things, but there are often, not so wonderful things. So what are the practices that get repeated over time? And sometimes these are things we've actually named out loud that we are intentionally doing, that we know we're doing, that we decided to do, and so we do them over time. But some of them are unexamined things that just seem to keep happening over and over again, that we don't do on purpose, and maybe it's not even something that we want to be doing, but it's the pattern. It's the culture of the place. So we're going to do a little bit of tables So talk a little bit about St. Andrew's culture. So, and think not just in terms of descriptive words like friendly, but an actual thing. Like when someone new comes in, 3 or 4 people come and greet them. Something you can see with your eyes that a videotape could pick up. So an actual behavior that you see repeated over time. So talk about that with your tables, whether it's something we're doing on purpose or some things we just tend to do over and over again without examining it. Go ahead and speak with your tables. With running the things, would somebody be willing to share from your table something about the culture?
I've seen a lot of people getting mugged in the narthex.
Notice the mug is rainbow in the slide? Just saying. How about this table?
Just kind of dawned on me. When we were in the pandemic, we went to Zoom, but St. Andrew has continued with Zoom, and I think it plays an extremely vital role for those who are unable to attend. I know personally our brother-in-law and our niece started, and they live in Washington State. Howard has since passed, but his daughter, every Sunday on Zoom from Maple Valley, Washington.
Sneak it up behind you. Go ahead.
We talked about our culture of, can I say high-ish? High-ish church? Liturgical liturgy that may or may not be familiar to somebody coming from a different tradition, and that we have a culture of reaching out and trying to assist people in understanding, if they're new, how to go about following the bulletins or participating in the worship service.
Or which hymnal to use.
So people reach out. We have a culture of people like helping other people along. Is that what you're saying? To help.
We are Reconciling in Christ Church, which not all Lutheran churches are, so.
And it's evident by our pride flag in the sanctuary. It's evident by the pride flag in the sanctuary. Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about how environmentally conscious and all the practices that are here that speak to environmental consciousness, as well as reaching out to the wider community through all the different, Sakatumi and, the food drive and all the different things that you can visually see that are going on from the church here to the community.
Something that was just mentioned now, that's one of the things is I see it is what makes St. Andrew distinctive is we reach out to so many different things that make the community better. Doesn't necessarily bring more people into the congregation, but it's helping the community and the world, hopefully. And I take pride in that and involved all the different things. Habitat for Humanity, the food pantries, the in-gatherings we do twice a year and that's around the world, not just here.
Okay, one last one.
So this is a great story. I was talking to a couple who's come here a few times now, but they had been going to Tai Chi for over the last year, and they'd been going to the strength and stability training. And they said to me, we thought at first there was a hook. And what they realized is there was no hook. And that was good.
I want to put that down. Or like no catch, like what's the catch? Yeah, no hook / catch. So I don't know about you, but I think one of the things that for me is important about like having a culture of inclusion is being able to be open to self-critique also. So I wonder, we've named a lot of the things that we're really happy about in terms of our culture. Did anything come up about the St. Andrew culture that's something that we actually like that's probably not such a great thing about our culture. Did anything come up at your tables? Mm-hmm. A very white culture, yep, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask, while she's writing that down, let me ask as sort of a related question that might frame this a little bit. How many times have you gone to a memorial service and learned something about that person and say, I wish I had known that when they were alive?
Mm-hmm. So maybe we don't always know each other as well as we could. One thing that comes to mind, I'm going to pick on Dana a little bit. Dana came to the worship session yesterday where we were planning Easter. Thank you, Dana, as well as lots of other people. And at the end, we did an evaluation of the meeting, and she shared something that she thought might be helpful, next time. And I reacted in some way like, oh yeah, I could have done that. And she was like, oh, it's not a critique. It's okay, it's not a critique. And she wanted, she really didn't want me to feel like she was critiquing me. And I think that that's a theme, that there's a little sense of like, oh no, I can't say anything that could be better, or I can't say that something wasn't as good as it could be because I need to take care of that person's feelings. And I don't want them to feel bad. And it's beautiful, that love that you don't want other people to feel bad. Like I see that. That's like a part of the nature of God. And also, there is a piece of white supremacy culture there, which is a little bit of fragility in whiteness, a little bit of like, we can't handle not being as welcoming as we think we are, And so I think that's a piece of our culture that we tend to, when someone brings up, hey, this actually wasn't that helpful, or what, there's like a jumping in to try to explain why it is that way and defend the person who might be at fault for the thing so they don't feel bad. And that's just so widespread. It's part of white supremacy culture if you look up the different markers of white supremacy culture. And so that is something that I see as part of the culture here. And part of community organizing is building that practice of evaluation so that we can kind of let go and be like, it's actually good to notice the things that could have been better and to learn from them. So that's one thing I would say as something that is a cultural piece that I am also struggling with and working on myself. Any other things that we want to share? What would I say? Fragility? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this might not be a popular take, but I'm going to ask you to bear with me. We talk a lot about welcoming our neighbors. I work in a workplace that has a lot of very conservative people in it, and a lot of people I know didn't vote the way I did. And when we talk about loving our immigrant neighbors and our neighbors with less power than us, I feel like that's sometimes easier than talking about loving our neighbors who voted differently from us. Because Jesus loves those people too, as hard as it is for a lot of us to understand when someone picks people that we feel crushed by. And I would say if we're willing to reach out to people who we really struggle to understand where they're coming from, that God wants us to love those folks too.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I think that speaks to a little bit of a class divide. This is not only a very white church, it's more of an upper middle class church than a working class church. And a lot of times liberal people are much more comfortable and really like to work with immigrants and refugees. We have a lot of trouble working with broke white people. And that's actually the majority of the people who are struggling in our country. And so that might be kind of a growing edge for us. But anyway, so these are some of our cultural practices that speak both to the world as it could be and the world as it is, and different growing edges for us.
Oh, Sorry, I'm an old science teacher. Those are culture plates. They're petri dishes with cultures, and one of them's staff and one of them's strap, and yeah. So next, Pastor Allison's going to talk about, so when we have a relational culture, how might we use a relational culture rather than just a friendly culture to work toward expanding our culture and work toward that world as it could be. So, go ahead.
I don't remember what I'm supposed to do.
Here we go.
I need an agenda.
Read the slide. Just read the bullet points.
Okay. Where am I? Okay, how do we build? Okay, yes. So, building a relational culture is one, like I said, that we already do a lot of. We do relational work here, and we want to live into that even more fully. And so we want people to be seen and known, and we're talking about that on a deeper level than just knowing their names or even knowing what they did for a living before they retired or what they do for a living now. We're talking more about, like, what do they really care about? Like, knowing one another's hearts. What really is weighing on them, and what are they really passionate about? What do they want to see in the world? Sometimes people say, what makes people tick? You know, what they could get really excited about. And in a relational culture, we don't just know information, we know stories. So it's not just, oh, you were a teacher. It's actually like know stories about what you experienced as a teacher. That paints a very different picture than just information. So the sharing of stories really weaves hearts together in a magical, special way. There's a reason that our scripture, our sacred, holy scripture, is not a theology textbook, but a book of stories. There is a sacredness in story. And there is, of course, the beauty of being seen and known, that when we know one another's stories, we can cherish one another more fully. And then there's a secondary layer that is when we know each other really well and we know what we care about and are passionate about, we can help people find purpose and we can help ourselves find purpose. So we can invite people into ways that they can live out their passions, either at St. Andrew or through St. Andrew in the wider world. And we also know who to call on in different situations, like who might want to make a difference on a particular issue, because we know what people care about. All of it? Yes. Is that everything? Okay. Oh, yeah.
So what we're talking about here is the ultimate goal is to have everyone engaged. And that seems like, well, duh. But I have talked with people who have found that to be challenging. So how can we help all of our members of our community find their piece in the puzzle? That's what a relational culture works toward. So how does this happen? Snap our fingers, we got a relational culture. Okay, done, bye. Have a nice 4 weeks. One tool to do this, work toward this, is with relational or one-to-one meetings. We call them one-to-ones because that's shorter than relational meetings, and sometimes people think relational meetings imply something else that we really don't. But in a relation,
it's not a date.
It's not a date. Yeah,
Sometimes people think it's a date because you get to know people on a deep level. So you got to be careful.
Yeah. I used to tell my students when I would put them in pairs, I'm not expecting you to marry this person. Just work with them for the next 10 minutes, right? Okay. So in a relational meeting, you develop understanding and trust. Building trust is not easy sometimes, especially like what Casey was talking about with someone who votes differently from you. Uncover their self-interest and maybe your own. Share stories to understand the why of what they do. Why do you work on Habitat for Humanity? You know, do you just like to wield a hammer? Or is there something more to it? And perhaps to agitate a little bit. Oh, you really, really like to bake. Well, we have an Easter breakfast coming up. How would you like to make 3 dozen scones for the, right? One-to-one meetings are a key tool for broad-based organizing, and a lot of you have heard about this before. We're going to talk more about it in depth next week. But for now, let's practice, because everybody could talk to somebody else, right? But I want you to think about, I want you to pair up with somebody you don't know very well. So you might have to move to a different table. Try to find somebody you don't know very well. That's going to be a challenge, but you can do it. Just not your spouse. And I want you to talk about a time when share a time when a relationship with someone was critical as you went through a particular experience. I'll give you an example. My mother died in 2005. I had started a new teaching job at Valley Catholic the week before she died. And so I got to experience both the benefit of having relationships with my family, with my close friends, with my church family, and how much harder it was because I didn't yet have a relationship with anybody at my new place of work. So when I came back, it was like, oh yeah, Pat, we're so sorry. What are you doing today? So think about a time when a relationship with someone was critical for you as you went through a particular experience. Now, it is 11:45. I'm going to give you, let's see, what's a multiple of 2 that's less than 10? 8 minutes. 8 minutes.
Science teacher, not math teacher?
Yeah, pretty much. So pair up, oops, sorry. I keep hitting the wrong button. There we go. So spend 4 minutes, decide who's going to be the talker and who's going to be the listener, and then spend about 4 minutes listening to one person, and then switch. I'll give you the 4-minute time. Switch, and then the listener becomes the talker, and the talker becomes the listener. Okay? Questions? Okay, move. Go. I love introducing one-to-ones to people because when we describe what we want you to do, the first reaction is all, no, I don't want to talk to anybody. Please don't make me talk to somebody. And then we do it, and then we have trouble getting you to stop. So it's a wonderful practice. And we'll be doing more of it throughout the next 4 weeks of the class. So first of all, I just want to know, how did that feel? I don't necessarily need to know what you found out. One of the things about one-to-one meetings is we keep confidentiality, so the only story you can tell is your own. But I am really interested in, how did it feel to talk with someone who maybe you didn't know very well? Or how did it feel to hear something about someone that you thought you knew really, really well? How did that feel?
Okay. As always, when 2 introverts try to talk with each other, it felt very awkward.
Okay. That's fair.
And you did it anyway. Good for you.
And yet you guys were one of the last ones talking. Yeah. So that's fair. That's fair.
But we warmed up, and once we got going, I think we could have carried on for another half an hour.
And that is an important point. Remind me, can you put a pin in that and remind me if I don't talk about that next week, to make sure you bring that up?
We were the last 2 left, and that's how we got together. Because the people we didn't know well already were pet. And she's a very close, I guess we'll just be close friends, because we've known each other for 25 years or whatever. We learned a lot. Yeah. So
you still learn new things?
Yes.
Amazing.
We contain multitudes, so we might know each other, but there's always more within us. And then I discover things about myself when I do one-to-ones. It's like, oh, I didn't even really know that was in there.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? One more? Feel? In general, thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down. In general, good experience, or never again, please. You'll never see me in this class again. Okay, I'll take that. Related question, what would happen if this practice were a part of our St. Andrew culture? We have a cousin congregation, St. Andrew Catholic Church in it's not downtown. Everything to me is downtown.
It's northeast.
Northeast. If it's across the river, it's downtown to me. But it's in northeast Portland. They have been practicing this kind of relational culture for so many years that it is embedded in everything that they do. So when the call goes out, okay, it's time to have one-to-ones and, about this, it's just like, oh, okay, and they set them up and they go. What would that mean for St. Andrew, do you think, if we could really get this going?
People would feel more comfortable sharing their sorrows as well as their joys. Because being sad is okay.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot.
That was so profound.
We would know each other better, trust each other better, and the relationships would be much deeper.
Well, as part of putting nourishing conversations together, this was my goal, is to get us just to sit down and have a meal and talk. And for me personally, although I was very busy during the time, just seeing faces show up week after week, it was really bonding. I think it just brings us closer.
I think one of the things that I think is real valuable when you have an opportunity to talk with someone that you haven't had much opportunity to talk with, and sometimes you create your own vision of what the person is. And it's so important to talk with people and hear about the struggles they've gone through, things that they've dealt with in their families or in their communities, and appreciate the stress that puts on them, and share love with them. Just sometimes people want to be listened to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and part of what I hear you saying there is it changes you. It changes your perspective of the person. It's compassion building. It breaks you open, and there's all this compassion that pours out of you for a person. Yeah, that's really profound.
I think it also can help us grow our ministry. Just as an example, today I talked to a couple people about the Advocacy Day at the state on April 7th. And I talked to them because I already knew a lot about them and what their passions were. So the more we know about each other's passions, the more we can invite others to join in what their passions are.
That can make our actions when we go to Advocacy Day much more powerful, and hopefully it brings life and energy to them because they're getting to act on what they care about.
Well, I was just thinking that, our culture is so much about wanting to help others and do things for others, but it's really hard to do unless you know somebody. And then just like the 4 minutes I was talking with Bob, it's like I already have some ideas about maybe how I could help him and some areas where I could maybe help out here that I would not have known about just going on the website,
That reminds me too of, what kind of some of what we were talking about with our culture. Then you mentioned, you called to mind that culture of wanting to help. And I don't know if I'm not thinking of specific examples here at St. Andrew, but certainly like in white culture in general, there can be like a white saviorism, like we want to help those other people, but there's an arrogance if we assume we know how to help them when we don't even know them. So what you said about actually, how do you help someone unless you actually know them, And so it's like, how do we actually build relationships with the people that at the outset we want to help them, but how do we have that come from a place of shared humanness, not that they're just an object of the service that we can provide them.
Become a better listener. And it just dawned on me when you were saying that, because oftentimes we think we know what's better for them, as opposed to listening and acting upon that.
We talk a lot about that in community organizing, and that's the difference between organizing and doing service. Both are important. We need both things. But there's a famous story in the organizing culture about an organization that went to Africa to build a well. Well, of course they need a well. Everybody needs a well, because the women were walking for 2 miles to get water. They said, wow, we're going to build this well. So they went in and they built the well, and then they found out that the people of the community hated it because that going to go get the water was not just about water. That was how they built their community. Nobody bothered to ask the women of the community if they would like to have an alternative to walking 2 miles to get water. So when we build relationships with people, we learn to ask them, and we learn to walk with them instead of walk for them. Exactly.
Nothing for us without us, yes.
Exactly. Okay, so you're up.
Okay, so we are out of time, but I'm curious if there's anything that, based on what we said today, that you want to ask a question about or have a concern about that you'd like to raise before we go. No? Well, there is a lot more, some of it that we hinted at already, but we really appreciate you being here, and we look forward to getting to know one another better in this class and thinking about how we can bring relational practices, especially the practice of one-to-ones, into different aspects of our work together as a community. Thank you. Go in peace.